It's Platt, and today we try a Nitro Stout from Colorado. That's next on Platt's Beer of the Week. So the holidays are winding down, and I'm still though in a mood for holiday type beers. It's still cold outside, so some of the maltier beers is something I'm kind of looking forward to. So that's why I picked this chocolate orange Nitro Stout from Breckenridge Brewing. Breckenridge Brewing is based in Littleton, Colorado. The beers are available most places across the U.S. or the continental U.S. for sure. The brewery was founded in 1990 by a gentleman named Richard Squire. He opened it in Breckenridge proper. A few years later, though, the brewery started expanding pretty quickly. So to keep up, in 1996, they moved their kegging and bottling facilities off-premise onto another property. By 2010, Breckenridge Brewing merged with Wine Coop Brewing. If you're familiar with Denver or the Denver beer scene, you know Wine Coop is one of the bigger brew pubs down there. It's near the Coors area, if I remember right. Wine Coop was opened and founded by former Lieutenant Governor in 1988, former Lieutenant Governor of Colorado, that is, in 1988. So when those two merged, it was kind of big news in the Denver brewing scene. 2012, Breckenridge collaborated with the Denver Comic Con to produce comic-themed beers. The very next year, they reached out to several local artists or snowboard artists that do special paintings on snowboards, and they collaborated for snowboard-themed beers. Most recently, in 2016, Breckenridge was bought by InBev, which is the parent company to Budweiser. I know this makes some craft beer people kind of moan or complain, and they're not happy when their favorite local microbrew sells out, but just talking to some of the brewers I have over the years, these people put a lot of time and work into building a brewery, and after 20 plus years, a lot of them are ready to move on, especially if their kids are not into the brewing thing, if it's not something they hand generationally. Why would you want someone to turn down 200-300 plus million from one of these big companies? I understand the concern in the craft brewing community, but there's so many more craft breweries out here. If Budweiser buys up 4 or 5 of them, doesn't matter. And to me, those people have earned that break. So that's just my 2 cents. Before we try this Nitro Stout, though, let's check out the stats. Okay, so before we try this beer, let's kind of go over what a nitro beer is, especially what the term nitro means. Nitro refers to nitrogen, or the gas that's used to carbonate the beer. If you're a home brewer or been, done the brewery tour or whatever, you know that most of the time it's CO2, carbon dioxide, that's used to carbonate beer. It's natural. It naturally is produced by the yeast when fermentation happens. If you home brew at home, you'll do what's called bottle conditioning, and you restart fermentation in the bottle to trap that CO2 to give you your carbonation. In bigger breweries, though, they'll force CO2 into the beer, and that's what they have to do with nitrogen. Nitrogen does not naturally occur in the fermentation process, so nitrogen is added to the beer. What nitrogen does, and more technically N2 is the atomic symbol for this. What nitrogen does compared to carbon dioxide is nitrogen is insoluble, and it gives beer a mouthfeel to it. It doesn't escape like CO2 does. And it gives a certain mouthfeel, certain creaminess to the beer that CO2 does not. Now, you're not putting pure nitrogen in the beer. Generally, it's a blend, roughly 70% nitrogen or N2 and 30% carbon dioxide or CO2. Nitrogen tends to not work well with hops, or tends to fade the hop flavor, aroma, or what have you. So nitrogen's preferred in more malt forward beers instead of beers like your IPAs or pale ale, something like that. So that's why you tend to see nitro beers being stouts, porters, etc. And this is what we have here. A good example of a nitrogen beer, the first one I ever was introduced to was Guinness. It was really great in front of guests when I first started bartending. If I had a bottled Guinness, I would just dump it right upside down, or I would just open the handle full and walk off from a draft. And a lot of people were expecting just a foam bomb like you would get with a regular beer if you did that. But again, because of the nitrogen, it never overflowed, and I always thought that was a great little gag. So, well, let's try this nitro beer from Breckenridge Brewing. Oh, boy. You hear that pop? That was from the nitrogen cartridge. And see, I can get a little aggressive with the pour. And you see, I'm not getting a huge head. But you'll slowly see the bubbles cascade. It might be tough on this camera. But you'll see a certain lightness, and it'll get a little darker and darker. And that's how the foam kind of cascades. You ever smell? Oh, I get a lot of those dark malts, dark chocolate. We get about a finger of darker, not real dark, but a darker khaki head. Let's give her a try. Oh my goodness. I haven't had a nitro beer in a while, but I forgot about that creaminess, and it works with those chocolate malts, that orange. The orange is very subtle, but it is there, and it plays, again, nicely. Get a little bit like the cocoa nibs. There's plenty of those dark malt, the kind of the coffee malts. You get, if this was just a regular stout, they would definitely be more pronounced, but the creaminess of the nitrogen provides a nice little balance. Body-wise, I'm going to say medium-ish, but it's still a very drinkable beer. I think this is something, if you're wanting to get people to try bigger beers, maltier beers, I think the creaminess kind of allows it to be more available to people's palates. Like a traditional dry Irish stout, like a Guinness, that turns off a lot of people. But I think this would be something, and again, with just a hint of orange in there, I think this is something your friends, your more Miller Lite drinking friends, would probably appreciate. That being said, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or beer suggestions for me to try, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.